Okay, anyway, so thank you everybody for joining. So this month we invited Naomi to talk about UX writing and technical writing. Yeah, I got a lot of requests about this issue as well, and I know I met Naomi a few years ago in an interview process at Gong. Um, I did not get the job, but I
Which
realized
was a mistake.
no, 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 no. To be honest, no, no. Naomi was, I really appreciated Naomi and I really saw just how, how great she was at UX writing. And if anybody had ever used Gong back in the day, I don't know where it's at now because, Naomi left the Gong. But back then, Naomi's, the UX copy in Gong was amazing. And Gong was a very easy to use tool because of it. So I was always really impressed with it. And I started following Nomi on LinkedIn, and she's been doing the UX writing stuff for several years now. And she's also involved in teaching UX writing with one of the courses here. So I invited her to come along and speak to us about UX writing. And she had the idea of doing a fireside chat. So we have some questions that I think we'll use and kind of guide us along the way. So there are generally about three areas here. So let me get them open here because I have too many tabs open. So the first set of questions are around understanding UX writing. What is it? How do you get involved? Next is how technical writers can add it to their toolkit. And then the last section, which I have some opinions on, is the future of UX writing due to the whole AI revolution now. So with that said, Naomi, do you want to introduce yourself? Say anything?
Sure. Um, I've been a writer in tech in Israel since I think 1998, going back a while. And so, right back then, it was always technical writing, and it was always called technical writing. But I think that as technical writers, we always were going and correcting UX writing. I'd be surprised if anyone on the call has never had to like tell a developer
Hmm.
to make it less Russian sounding or less bad English. And then I kind of noticed over the last probably 6, 7 years that this separate offshoot of UX writing was starting to gain traction. There's starting to be courses also run by Yuval Kecher here in Israel, although it's virtual, so you could be anywhere. But also there's another school based in Australia. And I was kind of initially I was pissed off with UX writing because I was like, hey, that's not fair. These people are coming in and stealing our jobs, right? It was like, we've been doing this for 20 years already, and it's not fair. Um, but then I also noticed the shift at work in that people were beginning to understand more and more. And I think it kind of is like there was a bit of a revolution in product design as well, where people started to understand that product design is much more important than they thought it was. And so I think probably writers piggybacked a little bit on that in, okay, we also need to make sure that the content's really good. So certainly for the last 8 years, there was a lot more focus in my work of making sure that all of the strings in the product would go through me as the writer. So so I guess I've been UX writing for around 8 years. At Gong, I was there for 4 years and I finished this Pesach. It would be I would call myself a full stack writer. So I was doing technical writing and UX writing. But I noticed over time that the majority of my work would be focused on UX writing. And then the technical writing part of having the release notes and the help center articles ready would be the kind of last minute work that I would do, like Indiana Jones grabbing his hat underneath the closing door, like, okay, the feature's going out on this date and I have to have the help ready for that. But at that stage, it was so easy to write the help because I was so familiar with the flow and the product and the steps that it basically wrote itself. So it was really not a big deal. And then I moved to HiBob this Pesach, and that was the first time that I've had um, a whole team that's dedicated just to UX writing and not doing any technical writing whatsoever, because we have another team for that, some of whom are on this call. So I was really interested that the company had decided to make this a separate area, because I think in Israel it's still uncommon for that to be the case.
Cool. So just starting off with some of the questions, I think the first one you sort of answered a bit, but so what inspired you to transition from like UX writing, and then how would you say it's different from technical writing?
Uh,
Because I think like just to give an example, like yeah, I think you can learn a bit of UX writing as a technical writer, but I'm horrible at marketing writing, like absolutely horrible. I can't do it. I can't stand it. I would never even try it. But UX writing, I think, how would you make the distinction?
It is.
I think that UX writing, there's a lot more focus on being involved in the development of the feature, in terms of the.
You marry someone.
Can we just get this
Yeah,
person
yeah,
to
yeah,
mute?
yeah. I'm going to mute somebody. Yeah, da, da, da.
Um, it's
Let me just.
Right, it's not a Yuri duck.
Ah, Ruth. Yeah, where is Ruth?
And my concern is, and he said something else like,
I'm trying to find it here. Well, 1 second here.
not interested in learning it. He said,
Uh,
rings the bells.
yeah, let's go this way.
It's just the rigidity thing. This is just
Um,
rigid because why? Like, if you like
mute all,
someone,
and then
and you're gonna, you know,
and then. No. Sorry, there we go. There we go.
all right. I'm unmuted.
Yeah. It took I hit the button and it takes a few seconds here.
Yeah. Okay. So I think the biggest difference is that as a technical writer, you need to know about the feature, but more or less you can go in kind of blind and play with the system, figure out how it works. You might have a few additional questions, but then you're okay to write up like a help article or something like that based on what you're seeing in front of you. Whereas with UX writing, it's about getting involved way earlier, understanding why the feature's even being developed. We talk a lot about the job to be done and what the user's trying to achieve. And it creeps into the whole area of UX and why we're even creating the product, why we're even creating a solution, and have we even understood really what the user's pain points are, as opposed to what they're going to do in the app. So it's going back a few steps in their user journey, especially when it's B2B. You're trying to understand how this person's going to use the product for their work. If it's B2C, then you're trying to understand, what they're trying to do. And Booking.com or Airbnb or something, like they're booking holidays or whatever. But you're really trying to make the experience as seamless as possible, and you're really trying to understand what is annoying for the users and how to smooth that journey for them.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's more of a proactive process, whereas the technical writing, you're usually documenting something.
Right.
Yossi asked a question in chat. So he said you were writing the docs. You said that writing the docs were easier because you had a deep understanding because of your involvement in UX writing. How do you find it works at HiBob with a completely separate UX writing team? Like, do the technical writers miss out on the context?
I guess that's a question for them, but I think we become a lot more exposed to the users themselves, why they want to do what they're trying to do, the sort of the root of the a solution rather than just kind of looking at what's in front of you. So I think from our perspective, we even become like subject matter experts because we understand so deeply what the users are trying to do and why. I'm pretty sure the technical writers also get that, but they probably don't get as much around the psychology and how to make the journey better and the information architecture within the product because they don't shape it as much because they don't have the seat at the table for that.
Yeah, so actually, Caroline just asked an interesting question too. Doesn't not being involved in dev become a disadvantage for the technical writer? Because like right now, like I get involved fairly early in the process. Because I'm also like a pseudo. I'm also doing the UX writing and also the technical writing. And so if technical writers come in later in the process, then they miss out on a lot of the context.
Yeah, I mean, I know at Gong, for example, that the when I raised perhaps having different people doing the UX writing and the technical writing, the pushback from a dev group lead was like, I don't want to have to explain everything twice. I
Yeah, yeah.
just want one person who understands everything end to end. And I think that's probably what keeps a full stack writer employed. But where it is split, yes, I think there is more onus on the technical writer to go and follow up and find the information that probably the UX writer had just by being exposed to it along the way.
Okay. What skills do like a lot of people here are technical writers and they might want to become UX writers like similar to after we met at Gong, I said I need to really improve my UX writing skills, and so I did the courses, I read the books. What skills do you think technical writers need to make them better suited for UX writing?
I think that technical writers naturally have a lot of skills that are completely transferable into UX writing in terms of trying to clarify information and make it digestible for users. I think that sort of how we break down things into steps, how we understand the user need, and we try to remove friction is something that is something a technical writer will find very, very easy to understand and will do intuitively, even without thinking about it. The areas that they need to understand more are in the UX realm, and that goes to sort of what is good design, what is the best way to give users information. Do you bury something in a menu versus do you have the button on the page? All that kind of area of best practices in UX and sort of the logical flow of things. I think technical writers are 80% there, naturally speaking, because of the way that we approach our work as technical writers. UX writers just take it a little bit further, and they also need to concentrate on brevity because it's known that people don't really like to read anything. If you think of like the apps that you enjoy using most, they probably are very, very intuitive. And as UX writers, we need to support that and to have the least amount of text as possible because no one likes to really read everything. No one wants a modal that has a massive paragraph that they need to understand in order to get to the next stage. So in UX writing, every single word has to audition for its part on the page. Whereas in long form writing in the Help Center, you can put that whole paragraph in because you have the space to do so.
Okay. Yoni asked, do you get any training on the psychology side of things?
I think that's a really good question. Do you get training? I think it's not something that you get trained on. Like, I think if you're hired as a UX writer, you're expected already to know. But there's a whole wealth of information on the internet. I'm constantly reading Medium articles. There are great Medium spaces like the UX Content Collective. There are loads of newsletters that link to articles, and then you get to learn that psychology side behind it. Nielsen Norman is in the psychology and how people think and what they want to do. And therefore, you pick it up along the way. Again, I think as technical writers, you're like almost there anyway. Like, I don't think it's a big shift. I think it's probably one of the most natural career path or zigzags that you could do versus, like you mentioned, marketing writing before.
Marketing writing doesn't work. I don't. That side of my brain doesn't function.
Yeah, being a marketing writer, you deal with things that are not facts, whereas both technical writing and UX writing, you deal with facts.
Okay, so another question on this, on the understanding of UX writing. So do you have like a really cool example of a UX writing project you worked on, and then like what the impact was on user experience?
Sure. I'll think of an example from Gong because I was there for longer, and I've at HiBob, I'm a team lead, so I'm less hands-on than I used to be. At Gong, we had for those of you who don't know, the product basically is a way to record Zoom calls that helps salespeople, specifically in the tech space, make more sales by analyzing the sales calls and giving pointers, assessing how interested the prospects are, and so on. Also a great tool if you have it in your company just for listening to users and getting information, which I think
Gong's amazing. I've built onboarding courses based off Gong sessions, so yeah. Everybody should use Gong.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
So for the sales space, we developed a board that would help them manage their deals, and a very important part of being a salesperson is forecasting. So gives their team's number to their manager, and it goes up and up the chain until you basically get to the senior RevOps people and even the CEO. So the numbers are critical because everything's based on it. Like if you think about where you work, they know how many people, like they know if they're growing or not growing. They know how many people they need to hire next year versus need to cut next year. They know everything from the numbers that you're giving and you're selling. So having accuracy on these numbers is critical. So we did a lot of work on our forecasting solution in Gong, where it affects everything a lot more granularly, and people's bonuses, salespeople are paid a base salary plus bonuses are affected by the numbers that they're giving. So it becomes very, very critical. So it's very important for a manager to want to get the numbers and to be accurate with the numbers from their team. So we took this whole problem and we spent a lot of time analyzing exactly how the product could help people put in their forecast numbers. And it meant that we realized that the salespeople don't want to have to go into Gong and then submit their numbers. So we would send them a reminder on Slack, and we made it funny. We put GIFs in, like, hey, it's time to put in your numbers and whatever, because they have to do it like Friday night before they go home. So we really kind of analyzed what the user needed to do, and then took that into making it the most easy to use product possible. and to great success. We now have a great forecasting solution in Gong.
Okay, cool. So the next section of questions are based on or revolve around how technical writers can become UX writers. And I had a question, but Batya actually asked a very similar question, so I'm going to steal her question. When interviewing for a UX writer role, does the UX writer have to submit a portfolio? And do they need to know the UX methodology? And what would be included in a UX writer's home assignment? So the whole kind of interview process, basically.
Great questions. In HiBob, the UX writing team is under the design organization. And as such, we are used to having portfolios. For example, right now I'm recruiting, and I think without a doubt, everyone submitted a portfolio. The portfolios don't have to be very big. It's in and of itself an interesting exercise to do, is to have a portfolio, because as you're creating a portfolio, you're thinking about the UX of the person who's going to look at your portfolio, and you're going to try and understand what do they really want to get out of my portfolio. So it's like a life imitating art loop there. So people will traditionally say, like, this was the problem. This was, what we thought. This is research that we did in order to, kind of back up our hunches of where we wanted to take the solution. Sometimes there's the option to do testing, like A/B testing, so they could check, I don't know, what's on the button, or if the flow is successful or whatever with real users. And then they put this together in the portfolio. So there's like screenshots, but it's also, because we're talking about the content, it's, I think, a lot more verbose than a product designer's portfolio would be. In terms of knowing UX, I think it's a given that you should know UX, but as I say, I think it's, for technical writers, something that you can pick up both based on your experience as a technical writer, but also by keeping your finger on the pulse through what's going on in the UX writing world. There's like, LinkedIn is basically the feed that I go to in order, like, I follow a lot of people who are big in the UX writing world.
Actually, yeah, on that note, I followed you actually, and that's how I've been keeping up on things. So
yeah, like every time I went to a conference, it's like, okay, follow every speaker, follow, and you just see what's buzzing. People often share articles and so on. In terms of a home assignment, I think it depends. At HiBob, we don't have a home assignment at all. We base decisions off the resume and portfolio and interviews. At Gong, there was a very thorough home assignment that it was basically based off an assignment that you might give to a product manager, whereby you would explain the problem and then sit with the interviewee in order to understand how they would approach the problem, all the questions that they would ask along the way in order to get information, which is, I think, for technical writers, part of what you do day to day. So it's not such a big deal, but then they would also have to suggest texts and then
explain the logic, yeah, behind. I remember that one. So yeah, there were several screens, and you had to suggest text, and then you had to explain the logic, which, to be honest, it was a very good assignment.
Thank you.
It was really hard, but it was
I made
good.
that assignment.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it was good.
Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the critical thing is knowing the right questions to ask.
Okay. So you touched on this a little bit, but the next question is, what resources can technical writers use to become a UX writer or become a better UX writer? So you mentioned LinkedIn following.
Yeah, for sure.
There are several conferences I know of. I've been to one or two at least. But
Yeah, the big conference is Button, which is every September, October time. And unfortunately, they decided to put it on a mountain time or a Pacific time even, which is not great for us in Israel. And also this year at least they put it on a Friday, which was also very antisocial of them. There are smaller conferences in Europe. There's also LavaCon, which is also Pacific time. But I think conferences aside, there's courses that are not too expensive. I think if you've been technical writing and you have a knack and you're always the person who's pushing yourself up to the product manager or the developer and saying, we need to change this, we need to change that, you're probably pretty much ready to become a UX writer, and you can probably learn most of what you want to learn either by reading a lot of articles. Like I say, Nielsen Norman is a great website.
and then
On
you have
Medium.
the course that you're affiliated with, which
Course
I
I'm
think, to
affiliated
be
with
honest,
the UX,
if you're in a startup, a lot of startups like you're like the lone technical writer, and a
right?
lot of times the teams the company's actually willing to pay to add that. So go ahead, yeah, you can
Yeah. So the UX, I'm affiliated with the UX Writing Hub, which is run by Israeli called Yuval Kecher, who has terrible English. If you ever see his writing, it's always like I think there's a big dissonance in the rest of the world. Like, but it's just a nice Israeli guy who's trying to make his way in the world, and understood the importance of UX writing himself along the way. And
Yeah, I
his
think the
course,
website itself, you can, I mean, you should subscribe to it because he does send out some emails, blog posts, and things like that.
yeah,
So even if you don't do the course itself, at least follow because there's a lot of good info there.
there's also, I think it's called the UX Writing Collective, which is the course out of Australia. They send even more newsletters, at least lately. Those are probably the main ways that I think I picked up
I don't think
more.
that the courses aren't super expensive either. So I think,
If your company will pay for it,
yeah.
great. Um,
It's not thousands of shekels. It's like,
but it's not terrible. They also have like UX courses on like Udemy, and
yeah,
like
yeah.
Apple has one like that. They're also well priced.
Yeah. Okay, wait, there are a few questions here. Just So do you have a UX writing style guide? And if so, how do you enforce it?
Also a good question. We do have our own style guide. I think it's probably 80% the same as the technical writer's style guide. It just probably dives down into areas. Designers have a design system. And for example, if you have an empty state, which is when the page has no content on it, and you want to explain to a user why there's no content on it. So there's like, I don't know, 6, 7 different kinds of empty state, depending on the reason that it's empty. It could be that the user is new to the system and they haven't, like, I don't know, if you're new to your Gmail and you haven't got any emails yet, then you'd be like, no emails here yet. When you get an email, they'll appear here, versus there's an error, versus the user needs to like do something in order to generate data into a report or whatever it is. So empty states, there are a bunch of different kinds. And so we're trying to templatize as much as possible so it's easier, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time a writer is writing one of these error states. We just empty states. We just want to make it more consistent for the user across the platform. So that, for example, is something that I wouldn't expect that you would find in a technical writing style guide, but otherwise, I think, the use of the terms is the same. Technical writers have to go with what's put in the product, so UX writers get to decide what they wrote in the product, if something's capitalized or not. That kind of thing is shareable across both both different disciplines.
Okay, so there are a few more questions. So I'll combine them. So Sophia asked, no, it's not Sophia. Bhatti asked, do all UX writers have to know Figma and be proficient in it? And then Sophia asked, which software is most used by UX writers? I assume it's Figma, but go ahead and answer.
Yeah. Yes, and I also didn't answer the second part of your earlier question, the question before. So Figma is where we do most of our work because that's where the designers are designing, and I consider myself to be a tourist in Figma. I know that there are UX writers who are better at Figma and who can create their own screens and so on and so forth. Product designers ideally would use something called a component, which means you can update the text once and it'll update across the entire file. They don't always do that. So I don't, as a UX writer, that's typically interfacing with a lot more product managers than the designer. I don't want to have to be responsible for updating all of their designs. So I will usually update it once and then tag the designer, like, please make sure it's consistent or against in the rest of the flow. So I would describe myself as a tourist. It's not that difficult to use Figma. You go
For
in.
Figma, there are definitely Udemy courses for it.
Yeah.
I'm not. I've seen the graphics team where at Island where I work, they do crazy stuff with Figma in like 2 seconds. I have no idea how they do it.
Yeah.
I'm not on that level, and so yeah.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think basically as a writer, we don't want to get bogged down with creating Figmas and flows and so on, that like they have designers for that, and there are usually more designers than writers in an organization. So, we're the scarce resource and we shouldn't have to waste our time doing that. Most of the time it works. Sometimes you might need to use something and then it helps to know, I don't know, how to copy things. With regards to the question of how do you enforce the style guide, it's not always easy, especially if you have a team. We're a team of 5 different writers, so everyone has like slightly different habits, let's say, of like the way that they would write something. There are plugins, like there's a plugin called Frontitude that is Israeli made, which I've sampled them twice. I really, really wanted to support them as Israelis, but I didn't feel that the solution really answered my pain points as a UX writer, unfortunately. But they do have now an AI side to their plugin that will help you. You can upload your style guide, and then it'll help you write texts that are in accordance to the style guide. Another tool that we use a lot, particularly in HiBob, but I think it's quite futuristic and I don't think the world has really caught up with it, is a tool called Localize, which means that as UX writers, we're responsible for creating the keys. The developers take the keys that we create, and then that also syncs to translation, and we're therefore in charge of updating everything in the system. We don't need a developer to go in and make a change to a text. If the text is wrong, we can just do it really quickly and then it'll get translated. So those are the 2 main things, tools that we use.
Okay. So what are the main challenges like that a UX writer like that a technical writer should prepare for if they want to become a UX writer?
I think one of the biggest differences in UX writing versus technical writing is the tempo of the work. I think when you're a technical writer, you're focused on one thing for a longer time, whereas as a UX writer, you're asked for very short texts, but like a bazillion times a day. And as I say, you have fewer writers, which is the same for technical writers. You have fewer writers than designers or PM. So like, I think it's a massive challenge to be context switching all day. That is like either you love it or maybe you should stick to technical writing if you want to sort of focus on one thing. Because in any hour, I could be giving text for different features, and I need to understand the context of the entire feature. I could spend a whole day in meetings, like learning about different feature, and then I need to go and give the text. Like there's a lot of chop and change in your day, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge that you need to prepare for.
Okay, I wanted to jump into like yeah, we have like 22 minutes left. So I wanted to discuss the future of UX writing and AI. So I have some thoughts on this because like here at Island, before I came, the PM teams were they're all Israeli, and so their English is, you know, it fluctuates, but they were all using AI, and so there wasn't a lot of consistency across the application, but the English was normal. So that was already like an improvement. So with AI, how do you see the role of UX writers evolving?
I think that AI for all of us is a tool that either we embrace it and use it as a tool in our toolbox, or we'll get left behind. So I think it's definitely something that we have a responsibility to stay on top of. I think right now it's not mature enough to automate areas that we would probably need automated. But it's getting there, and it will probably get there super fast. I think what is great for, you know, often I'll say, okay, I want to say this, this, and this. Give me 10 versions, and then I'll cobble together from its 10 suggestions a piece of text that I'm happy with. So I think we still need that human element. But I think because of the UX in the name, the UX writer needs to understand, zoomed out from each string, they need to understand how the flow works. And I think that's still something that AI has not intuitively understood that it needs to do. So if you're looking at I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head, like a flow for booking a hotel or something, you need to understand right from the main screen how the user's going to book the hotel and all the information they need to know along the way, and
Yeah,
progressive
even how they're going to arrive at the website and things like that, and what kind of mood they're going to be in.
yeah,
Yeah.
you need to understand that whole journey, and AI's not there yet.
Okay, so what can UX writers do to ensure their skills remain relevant, even though, you know, we're becoming more and more AI driven?
I think it's embracing what we need to know. Like specifically at Hyper, we have a big drive on AI. We had like an AI day a couple of weeks ago, and the whole company has been encouraged to do everything, even stuff that you wouldn't think of doing using AI for is like, no, use AI, use AI. I think we're in a phase with it that we need to experiment and understand where it can help us in our work and where it can't help us in our work. And I think we're still discovering that. I think especially like the last conference I went to in September, there was way more chat on the what did they call it? AI Bubble Bursters Slack channel had way more chat than the how do you use AI to do your job Slack channel. And I think it's a sign of people resisting the change, but I think it's use it or get left behind. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah. No, I'm
AI,
finding that it's making my work a lot faster, so I can actually do a lot more things. I mean, I still have, you know, I'm still doing all the same stuff, just doing it a bit faster. And also, it's very good for ideas because there are some times where, like, you know, I say, hey, like one thing, like I'll have a sentence here, and it's way too long, and I can write out the full sentence and then ask AI to give me some ideas on how to improve it, how to shorten it, you know, while still maintaining the meaning. And then I'll find all sorts of, you know. I'll get all sorts of suggestions. And then also you can ensure that you're maintaining the same sort of tone and the same sort of voice that you want. Again, so yeah, I don't think it's erasing the job. It's actually improving it and making it faster. But you have to be on top of it and have
yeah,
to
I think it's
have to
It
work with it.
potentially will change exactly what, maybe there was more creativity in the past of us having to think of how to write, and now you can pretty easily get a bunch of suggestions and whatever, and have that text, even as you say, by the PM suggesting what they want to say, but you still need to have the human come in and like review it and make sure it makes sense and it fits in with the entire flow, and it's, understandable, because it's still not at a place where we can just leave it to the machines and it could be all auto-generated. We're not there at all.
Okay, yeah. So I was going. The next question was, do you see AI as a threat to UX writing jobs?
So
To be honest, I don't. I see it as another tool and just us having to evolve. But
yeah, I think the potentially, like, what needs to happen is that companies need to understand, like a lot of companies are a lot more concerned about security and that kind of thing, and therefore, for example, they don't give or allow people to use ChatGPT because it's an open source tool, and anything that you put in there goes out and is like potentially used by everybody in the world. But I think, for example, in HiBob, we have an enterprise account, which is then not open source, in which case we can use the tools better without, sharing information with our competitors. So I think it's like there's different levels. Like we can definitely use it, but our companies need to support the use as well.
okay, yeah. So well, again, I think we touched on this one a bit, but so how can technical writers and UX writers use AI tools to improve their work without losing the human touch? Again, so how can we use AI and still maintain creativity?
I think that the creativity comes in, I think you're able to get your hands on a lot more information, and then the creative part is understanding how to use the information into creating the best experience, versus not having that information and just trying to do the best job. So even if it, like, you can use ChatGPT very nicely to do research, like if you're this kind of persona, why do you need to do this kind of report or whatever it is? You can get a lot more depth of information, but with that knowledge, you need to understand how to put that through into your product and to make your product better. So the creativity is there. I think it's just maybe change shape a bit.
Okay, so last question I have, and then I think we can open it up to. Usually we keep these open, but we had some issues today. So I have my credit card out. I'm about to sign up, for a UX writing course. However, I'm now unsure if there's going to be a future for me because of AI writing. What should I do? Should I still pursue UX writing, or should I say no, it's dead in the water?
I definitely don't think it's dead in the water. I think it's something that is potentially going to change, and you should try and find a course that allows for that. For example, in the UX Writing Hub, Yuval has sections on AI and using AI, and I think that's it. You need to be future thinking, making sure that you're not getting a syllabus that is just going to age very, very quickly. But I think a lot of these things are still relevant and will continue to be relevant. And, change is the only constant, right? Change is the nature of everything. So even as we, as technical writers, would need to understand how to appeal to millennials and Gen Z audiences as time goes by, this is just another facet of how we need to keep things moving forwards.
And also, you shouldn't pay with a credit card yourself. You should speak to your company and get them to pay for it, so you don't have that issue. But
Preferably.
yeah. All right. So I'm going to try to unmute and then open it up for questions from everybody else here. So I'll give it a try here.
Short walk, because I think I actually have arrived at my house.
Okay. Let's see. So I tried to unmute. It says ask to unmute all. Why? Well, I'm the owner here, so. Oh, I think you can unmute yourselves now. Yeah, I see Yossi unmuted himself.
Yeah,
Okay, how did you do that?
I pressed the button when it asked me if I wanted to unmute or
Oh,
not.
okay, good.
So took a lot of skill. I actually have a question, if that's all right.
Sure.
So how do UX writers measure their success?
Great question. If you find out, let me know. I think it's difficult because I'm just checking who's all right. Yeah, my cleanup. I think it's difficult because it's very hard to separate the design of the feature and the UX of the feature and the content from one another. And even if, you know, as a product manager, they've decided that somebody needs this feature, and it could be that the feature is awful and the flow is awful, but people are successfully completing it because they so badly need to complete that flow. And I think it's very hard to measure, oh, this worked because the content was great versus the design was great. So I think it's very, very nuanced on what's good. I think it's easier and probably better to check along the way by doing testing, which is not always possible because of time restrictions. But I know that in B2C, it's a lot easier to, I know like Booking.com do a lot of user testing, for example. So they'll put like, 50% will get this button and the other 50% will get this button, and then they can track real time which button is being more successful, and then they know it's because of the text on the button. So it kind of depends. I think it's not an exact science. I think it is difficult to measure, but I think, for example, if you look at HiBob, the one thing that everyone always says, like the number one thing, like the UX is great, the UX is great, the UX is great. So we know that like as a design team, we're doing well. That's like the number one thing people say about HiBob. So yeah, it's difficult, but there's definitely value there, and showing that you're able to speak the language of the user and they're able to understand what they need to do intuitively. It's all part and parcel of measuring that success.
Okay, does anybody have another question that you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi Naomi, this is Batia. Thank you very much for the insight. You said HiBob is hiring UX writers, but I didn't find it on LinkedIn or on HiBob's site. Can you tell us where you posted that?
We didn't post because even though we're an HR company, in the design team, we just do things a little bit differently. So it was kind of more of a word of mouth referral situation. But if you want to send me something, then just reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll talk to you.
To be honest, this you said it's an HR company, but our company is doing the same thing where we don't post jobs for the most part. The HR team is actually going out and recruiting people. They asked me today. They sent me a link of somebody's LinkedIn profile. They said, "Hey, do you know them? Can you recommend them?" I actually think this is becoming a trend now, where you're seeing less job descriptions, and companies are actually looking for referrals internally and then hiring that way. So it just is something to keep in mind if you're looking for a job. Like if you know somebody at a company, maybe reach out to them and ask them if they're hiring, because it might be the case that they are, they're just not publishing it.
Yeah, totally.
It seems to me like for a lot of writers, the transition is sort of to be doing what you did at Gong, to be both this like in many companies to be this combination, and so it's adding on UX skills to their existing technical writing skills. But is that something that can be sustained over a long time, or is it sort of the UX writing takes over, or they're neither this nor that? Like, can it?
I mean, I certainly found that for me, the UX writing took over. I was like, I don't know, 90% of my time involved in ideation meetings and thinking about the users and what they need. And then, as I say, like the technical writing was like a afterthought, like, oh shit, everything's getting released this week. I better write everything into the help center, and boom, 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 and that was the way like I did it. But I know that there are other writers who really enjoy the process of writing longer form writing, so they sort of stay more in their comfort zone. I think it's kind of, what is your passion, and where do you want to grow as a person, as a career, like where is your passion, where is your interest? I personally find the psychology behind the user flow and everything a lot more stimulating than I felt like with technical writing, I was always kind of getting too late into the process, and I wanted to be able to shape the flow more. So I think it just depends on you, and I think there are positions that are more traditionally technical writers, and there are positions that are UX writers, and then there are these hybrid, like you're expected to do everything, and how you manage that is kind of up to you.
I think I rather like the expected to do, like the idea of, I guess that previously I was at a place where they didn't have any UX writing at all. And when you came to say, can you fix it? They say, we've done it already, it's too late. And so the idea of as a technical writing, being able to have the influence that a UX writer does is very good. And so I guess the main thing is that somebody has to is having a company where UX writing is being done, and whether it's the writer or a UX writer, like that's the big step forward, that there's such a, how do you say in English, there's such a that
Forward
product
thinking.
realize, what do you say? What
Yeah.
is it?
Forward thinking company.
A forward-thinking company that realize that no, actually the big step as a technical writer who's been around the amount of time that you've been around is that companies actually realize that you have to have proper text in the user interface. Like that's a really big thing happened. Previously, you were lucky if they listened to you or they didn't listen to you. And the big step forward is that all the companies realize that it has to be done, and whether it's done by the technical writer, which is the first step forward, or they actually move to a person who is full-time UX, which is like the next thing. Like the main thing is that we're all happy that someone's thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to people who sort of position themselves in their company, like they started off as technical writers, they wanted more to move into the area of UX writing. They asked their company to like pay for a course or whatever, and then they were able to show that they have more impact by getting earlier into the process. And there's a lot of ways as well, what feedback you get from the customers, whether it's support tickets or whatever, to know like, okay, if we just change this and this, then no one would open a support ticket because it would be completely obvious. And that's where saving money helps you position yourself more like before the release date, and not like as an afterthought.
Naomi, I just wanted to quickly say the use case in my company is that I have a weekly meeting with our product design lead, and we review in Figma what is about to go to the developers. It's actually in the Figma stage, our Figma workflow, it's in the developer handover stage, so that it's already been reviewed and some text has been drafted out, and then we go through it together to look at consistency and conciseness and correct language, and make sure that we're expressing what we want, the direction we want, and we do this on a weekly, very consistently. And that serves us, there's a rather small shop I'm in, but it helps us very well.
Yeah, I mean, I would call that plaster text because, just just by the way of being an English speaker slash, writing for a living, you can automatically improve the texts. But the art of the UX writing is knowing that you're really helping the user in that point in their day. If they're there first thing in the morning, checking their emails with their coffee, or, if it's something that they have to spend 4 hours a day doing, et cetera, et cetera. So the more that you understand the user and their pains, the better your text will be. So I think you're definitely moving the needle on, there's no bad English and it's consistent, et cetera, et cetera. But I think if you were to spend more time earlier and understanding, then you'd probably end up with slightly different texts than you're getting on a weekly.
Yeah, I think it's a difference of impact. So like if you're just a technical writer and they ask you to do UX tech just to fix the copy in the UI real quick, you're cleaning up the English, but as a UX writer, you need to go a lot deeper, understand the user journey, and then you can have more of an impact. Whereas, I think in the later stages, it's just keeping things consistent and clean. And it may not necessarily be useful. But anyway, I think we have time for one short question if anybody has one. No. Okay, cool. All right. So anyway, thank you again for joining. And Naomi, thank you so much for donating your time to this. It was really useful. I hope it was useful for everybody as well, because it's, there are a lot of people talking about UX writing and technical writers who want to become UX writers. And seriously, like you started doing this quite a few years ago and you initiated it at Gong. And, again, when I met you during the interview process, I was really impressed. And I said, I have to follow you. I have to start. I literally, afterwards, I went to my manager and said, hey, I want to do a UX writing course because I thought I was weak in that area. And so anyway, so thanks again. And yeah, cool.
Sure. I'm here.
Everybody have a decent lunch. I will go get my hour-old burger now and then go to meetings and then eat it at 3 o'clock. So,
Thank you both. That was great.
Amazing. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.